I've been a ranger in the Bridgemont backcountry for 9 seasons now, and let me tell you, it's a job. Most folks think it's all scenic vistas and crisp mountain air, right? Nah, 90% of the gig is reminding wide-eyed tourists that no, granola bars aren't bear-proof. And yes, that little stream is going to get your hiking boots wet. The other 10%? That's the part the glossy brochures conveniently leave out. That's the stuff that sticks to you, the kind of grime you can't scrub off, no matter how many showers you take. 3 years ago, almost to the day, a day hiker named Sarah Lee vanished without a trace on the Crooked Fork Trail. The official file, neatly tucked away in a dusty cabinet back at the station, still says lost. Just a simple, cold, clinical word. But I was on the search team. I walked those woods, I smelled that air, I saw things, and I know what took her. I've never spoken about it. Not really, not to anyone who'd believe me. But tonight's different. Tonight I'm talking. Picture this with me for a second. You're deep in a midnight forest, the kind of dark that swallows the stars, so utterly quiet that your own heartbeat starts to sound like footsteps right behind you. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig makes you jump, your nerves stretched thin as piano wire. Now, really lean into that feeling. Imagine hearing that second set of steps, that phantom echo of your own fear. Stop dead the moment you do, like it's waiting, watching. That was hour 6 of the search for Sarah. And believe me, that was just the very beginning of it all. The woods were just clearing their throat. The radio, a beat-up old Motorola, crackled to life at 1847. The times burned into my brain. Missing female, 26. Last seen at the Granite Overlook. Standard language, right? The kind of dry, clipped report you hear a dozen times a season. But the dispatcher, old Brenda, her voice was shaking. Not just a little tremor, but a genuine, terrified wobble that made the hair stand up on my arms. Brenda's seen it all. She doesn't shake for a lost tourist. That's when the first prickle of unease started, a cold worm wriggling in my gut. We rolled 2 trucks, the K9 unit with their best tracking dog, and me on my trusty ATV, headlights cutting through the growing dusk. Rain had been off and on all afternoon, a miserable, chilling drizzle that promised to turn the trails into slick, muddy traps. Now, as we sped deeper into the park, a thick, heavy fog was settling in, clinging to the trees like wet wool, swallowing the distant peaks. Visibility dropped to nothing in minutes. I remember thinking, trying to reassure myself, we'll find her by dawn, we always do. She probably just took a wrong turn, maybe twisted an ankle, that's the one. It's what keeps you going. The trailer, the dogs, usually straining at their leashes, ready to bolt into the woods. Not an inch. They sat there, ears flat against their hands, whimpering, low, mournful sounds that made the hair on my neck stand up again. These were trained animals, fearless, relentless. They never refused a track. Not like this. They just sat, staring into the impenetrable fog, their tails tucked tight between their legs, whining like scared puppies. That should have told me everything I needed to know right then. It should have screamed a warning. But you push it down, don't you? You tell yourself it's the weather, the unfamiliar scent, anything but the truth that's clawing at your subconscious. We split into grid quadrants, a standard search pattern. I drew the short straw, or maybe the long one, depending on how you look at it, the Crooked Forks North Spur. It's a brutal climb, elevation going from a respectable 2,000 feet up to a dizzying 4,800. The air grew thin, cold, and heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. My headlamp, usually a comforting beam, felt like a weak, struggling eye against the oppressive darkness. Then I saw them, fresh boot prints, size 7, distinct Vibram sole pattern, pressed deep into the muddy trail. A perfect match to Sarah's brand, her preferred hiking boots. My heart gave a hopeful lurch. We had a track, but then the hope soured. The tracks didn't follow the well-worn path. Oh no, They veered sharply downslope, cutting straight towards the old logging gorge. Nobody uses that gorge anymore, not since the 2008 landslide made it unstable, choked with fallen timber and treacherous ravines. It's a place you actively avoid, a forgotten scar on the mountainside. Why would anyone go down there? My radio hissed static every time I keyed the mic, a frustrating, insistent rasp that chewed up my words. It was like the mountain itself was trying to cut us off, to isolate us. And then the smell hit me. Metallic, sharp, like you'd just bitten down on a copper penny, but richer, deeper. Every ranger, every seasoned woodsman learns that smell, that specific, unsettling combination. It's wet iron, yes, but mixed with something else, something organic, something you instinctively know you don't want to name, don't want to identify. It's the smell of blood, fear, and decay all rolled into one, and it was thick in the air, a cloying, sickening perfume that clung to the fog. I followed the prints, my headlamp beam bouncing ahead, every nerve jangling. The descent into the gorge was brutal, a scramble over loose shale and slick, moss-covered rocks. The air grew heavier, colder, the sounds of the forest muffled by the sheer density of the fog. Then the tracks ended, not faded out, not washed away by the rain, but ended, abruptly, like the person making them had simply ceased to exist, like the soil itself had opened up and swallowed her whole. It was impossible, illogical, yet there it was, a clear, distinct print, then nothing but undisturbed mud and tangled roots. I swept my beam left, right, up into the gnarled boughs of ancient firs, my breath catching in my throat. Nothing, no sign of a struggle, no broken branches, no disturbed undergrowth, just gone. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Did she get picked up? Did she suddenly sprout wings? My ranger training screamed for an answer, any answer, but the forest offered only silence. Then, my light caught something, a flash of color, incongruous against the muted greens and browns. A ribbon, yellow, the kind of cheap, glossy gift wrap ribbon you curl with scissors, tied neatly, almost deliberately, eye level on a cedar branch. It hadn't been there the week before. I'd ridden this very trail during fence checks, my eyes scanning every detail. I knew this part of the woods like the back of my hand. This ribbon was new, a cold dread colder than the fog, trickled down my spine. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and that's when my stomach dropped right through my boots. It was warm. Not sun warm, not friction warm, body warm, like someone had just removed it from their skin. A primal, instinctual alarm bell screamed in my head. This wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. The gorge was a maw, dark and silent, save for the drip of condensation from the trees and the frantic beat of my own heart. I stood there, frozen, the warm ribbon clutched in my gloved hand, trying to process what I'd just found. And then it came, a sound, a chirp, almost electronic, impossibly clear in the dense fog. I've heard every sound this forest makes. Cougars screaming their territorial claims, owls barking their hunting calls, porcupines whining their odd, high-pitched complaints. This wasn't any of those. It was alien. It sounded like a dial-up modem gargling water, a digital shriek that somehow felt organic and utterly wrong. I fumbled for my radio, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. Base, this is Ranger Miller. I need coordinates logged. Possible evidence. Repeat. Possible evidence. I found, but the words dissolved into a harsh burst of static. Just a wall of white noise, an electronic scream that drowned out my voice. The mountain was truly cutting me off now. Then came the whistle. 4 distinct notes, descending, clear, and chillingly melodic. It wasn't a bird. It was too perfect, too deliberate. It sounded like a child taunting you, a playful, yet utterly sinister melody echoing through the ancient trees. It drew me in, against my better judgment. I took a step toward the gorge's deepest shadow, compelled, almost hypnotized by the sound. And then the world stopped. The wind, which had been a constant whispering presence, died completely. The fog, for a fleeting moment, thinned. Clouds parted just enough, just a sliver, to let a column of cold moonlight pierce through, pooling on a curtain of old man's beard lichen that draped from an impossibly ancient fur. And behind it, in that momentary shaft of silver light, I saw something. Tall, impossibly tall. It rocked, not walked, not swayed in the wind. It rocked side to side, a slow, deliberate pendulum motion, like it had no joints, no natural gait, just a bizarre, unsettling wobble. My eyes tried to make sense of the impossible silhouette. My mind screamed at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot, mesmerized by the sheer wrongness of it. I blinked, and it was gone. Just the curtain of lichen, swaying gently in the wind that had suddenly returned, as if nothing had ever been there. But I saw it. By morning, the crew regrouped, a collection of weary, mud-splattered figures huddled around thermoses of lukewarm coffee. Nobody mentioned the whistle. Nobody admitted to hearing the strange chirp or seeing impossible rocking shadows. But I saw it in their eyes. Bloodshot whites, the vacant 1,000-yard stare you get when your map of reality has suddenly, violently folded in on itself. They'd seen something out there too, or heard it, or felt it. That primal fear that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world. They just weren't talking about it. We widened the radius, grid-searched 2 more miles of treacherous terrain, pushing ourselves past exhaustion, but it was pointless. The dogs, those brave, loyal animals, still refused to cross the fork, their whines now softer, more resigned. Sergeant Alvarez, a man who'd faced down grizzlies and floodwaters without a flinch, cursed under his breath, kicked at the dirt in frustration. "Forrest ate her up," he grumbled, his voice hoarse with defeat. He didn't know how right he was. He thought it was an accident, a fall, an animal attack. But I knew. The forest hadn't just eaten her. It had taken her. It had welcomed something else in to do the job. Back at the station, the air was thick with unspoken questions. With the smell of stale coffee and damp gear, that night sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying the rocking shadow, the metallic smell, the impossible warmth of the ribbon. I found myself drawn to the old archives, dusty boxes filled with forgotten incident reports and local histories. That's where I stumbled upon it. The old-timers, the ones who lived deep in the hollows, the ones whose families had been here for generations, they had a name for it. They called it the hollow stag. Not a deer, not a spirit, but the hollow stag. Lumberjacks whispered about it in the 30s around crackling campfires, their voices low and hushed, eyes darting into the surrounding darkness. Miners talked about it in the 50s, after a crew went missing in a collapsed shaft, where the ground was too stable to have given way naturally. Even some of the early park rangers, decades before my time, had made cryptic entries in their personal journals, talking about unnatural silence and the feeling of being watched. The description was always eerily consistent. Antlers like a bull elk, impossibly wide, impossibly dark, but the body was wrong. All wrong. Too long, gaunt, almost skeletal, beneath what little hide it had. Arms that hung to its knees or lower, ending in grotesque, claw-like hands. And the face? Flat, like an owl's, but without the wisdom or beauty. Just blank, dark eyes set in a featureless void. They said it didn't make tracks like a normal animal. It left impressions that were too deep, too long, or sometimes none at all. And its methods? That's what made my blood run cold. They said it knots ribbons on branches, the kind left behind by careless campers, but it ties them in specific, unsettling patterns, and it lures its prey with mimic whistles. 4 notes descending. You follow the sound, you step off the path, you vanish. Campfire nonsense, right? Just spooky stories to keep kids in line. Except I'd seen the ribbon, I'd heard the whistle. and Sarah was gone. That night, I started dreaming in antler silhouettes, sharp and menacing against a moonless sky. The folklore wasn't just stories anymore. It was a terrifying potential reality. The next morning, with a grim determination I didn't quite feel, I logged the ribbon into evidence. Property tag 17-04, a mundane number for something so profoundly unsettling. I remember the camera flash, a bright burst of light, making the fabric shimmer with an unnatural sheen. It looked almost alive. Under the harsh, unforgiving glare of the LED lights in the evidence room, it wasn't just yellow anymore. It was translucent, slick, like frog skin, almost iridescent. It felt wrong to touch, like something that shouldn't exist. I sealed it in an evidence bag, the plastic crinkling ominously. I wanted to tell Captain Miller, to explain the warmth, the feeling, the connection to the folklore. But how do you explain a warm ribbon, a 4-note whistle, and a rocking shadow in a ranger report? You don't. You sound like you've lost your mind. By next morning, I went to check on it. The bag was still sealed, but inside the ribbon was gone, dissolved, reduced to a few slimy greenish fibers that smelled distinctly of pond scum, a fetid, stagnant odor that made me gag. Captain Miller, bless his pragmatic soul, just shook his head. He filed it under contaminated, unsuitable for analysis. He probably thought I'd stored it next to a leaky jar of pond water. The case, already teetering on the edge of cold, plummeted. Colder than creek melt in January. Colder than a forgotten grave. Protocol, the rigid, unyielding Bible of Park Service operations, dictates that searches remain active for 7 full days. After that, the forest is officially cleared, the missing person is reclassified, the search scaled back, eventually abandoned. We packed up our gear, the heavy silence of defeat hanging over us like a shroud. But I couldn't let go, not after what I'd seen, what I'd felt. Night shift ended at midnight 30, a time when the world feels most vulnerable, most exposed. Instead of heading home, I found myself back on my ATV, riding the familiar path to the crooked fork again. I needed answers. I needed to understand. The fog, a constant companion in this nightmare, clung low, thick as wet cement, muffling the world, stealing away all sense of direction and scale. I parked the ATV, killed the engine, plunging myself into an absolute, suffocating darkness. I listened. Nothing, just the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs. Then a low rustle, not the wind, not an animal. It was slow, deliberate, leaves parting one by one like something huge and heavy was dragging itself upright from a prone position. The sound was too close. My hand went to my sidearm, a futile gesture against the unknown. I spoke into the blackness, my voice a shaky whisper, barely audible even to myself. Sarah, if you're out there, flash your light. Give me a sign. No flash. Only that smell again creeping through the fog. Iron and rot, deeper, more pungent than before. The smell of something truly ancient, truly hungry. Against every fiber of my being, against every ounce of self-preservation, I walked. 50 yards past where Sarah's tracks had so abruptly ended, past the mossy blowdown, the air growing thick with that cloying stench. My headlamp beam, a desperate solitary eye, cut through the swirling mist. And then I saw it, a footprint, not a boot print this time, bare, impossibly long, at least 8 inches longer than my own size 12. The heel was narrow, almost pointed, and the toes splayed wide like a bird's talon fused with a human foot. It was alien, terrifying, and undeniably fresh. Another print, every 6 feet or so, each one deeper than the last, as if the weight of whatever made them was doubling with every step it took, and they led uphill, against gravity, straight up a near vertical incline that no human, no animal I knew could possibly navigate without handholds, without a struggle. But these prints were clean, deliberate. I followed, my breath ragged, my heart a frantic drumbeat in my ears. The ascent was grueling, but the prints were a morbid magnet, pulling me further into the impossible. They led to a small clearing shrouded in mist, where a ring of ancient rotting stumps stood like forgotten monoliths. And in the center, woven tight, a nest, of cedar fronds, green and fragrant, but woven with an unnatural precision, bowl-shaped, like something had meticulously constructed it. Inside the nest, stark against the dark cedar, lay Sarah's driver's license. The plastic was chewed, gnawed at the edges, and her photo, her smiling, innocent face, was scratched out, obliterated by something sharp and deliberate. It wasn't a random act of an animal. It was a message, a horrifying, personalized trophy. And that's when I felt it. Breath, right behind me, not mine. Hot, staccato, like a panting dog, but deeper, raspier. The air around me grew impossibly cold, then searing hot. I spun, my headlamp beam wildly cutting through the fog. And there it was. Not the whole thing, not at first. Just the antlers, gleaming, impossibly dark, impossibly wide, catching the faint glow of my lamp. They towered higher than my head, easily 10 feet off the ground, a crown of bone and nightmare. I didn't see the body, not clearly, just the antlers, and those long, impossibly thin arms, dangling strips of cedar like macabre parade streamers, swaying gently in the unseen breeze. My blood ran to ice. Every instinct screamed at me. I backed away, slowly, carefully, my eyes locked on those antlers, those hanging arms. It matched my pace, a slow, deliberate, terrifying dance. Then, without thinking, I broke. I ran, scrambling back down the impossible incline, my boots slipping, my lungs burning, not caring about the noise, about being heard. I ran as I'd never run before, a raw, animalistic terror propelling me forward. It didn't chase. That's the thing that haunts me most. It simply unfolded into the tree line, like it was always part of it, like it was the forest itself, coalescing for a moment, then melting back into the shadows and leaves, becoming indistinguishable from the ancient wood. It didn't need to chase. It knew where I was going. It knew. I made it back to the ATV, shaking so violently I could barely start the engine. The ride back to the station was a blur of fear and adrenaline. I filed a report. I sat across from Captain Miller, my voice hoarse, trying to articulate the impossible. He listened, silent, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. When I finished, the heavy silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years, he slid the form back across the desk. "Miller," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You wrote Unknown Wildlife Encounter. Change it. Change it to Hypothermia Misperception. Or you're on desk duty until your pension kicks in." His eyes finally met mine, and in them I saw not disbelief, but a profound weariness. He knew, or he suspected, but he was protecting the park, protecting the sanity of his rangers, protecting the fragile illusion of safety. So I did. I changed it. I wrote the lie. Sarah Lee, cause of death. Hypothermia. No mention of ribbons, whistles, or things that rocked without joints. Sarah's parents still send me Christmas cards every year. They're always polite, always hopeful. They ask if I remember their daughter's smile, her bright laugh. I lie, of course. I say yes. I remember her beautiful smile. The truth is, I remember nothing but antlers, the way they caught the moonlight, the way they disappeared into the trees. That's all that's left for me. I transferred out of Bridgemont a year after Sarah's disappearance. Requested a move to front country, paved trails, clear signage, a visitor center with Wi-Fi and a gift shop, a world away from the deep, dark woods. I figured the change of scenery, the constant chatter of tourists, the comforting hum of civilization would drown out the memories. It hasn't. Still, some nights, when the wind howls just right, it carries that whistle, not through the trees, not anymore, but through the vents of the vending machines in the break room, through the gaps in the office door. That distinct four-note descending melody. It's always there, a ghost of a sound, a reminder that some things, once heard, can never be unheard. I sleep with the lights on now. A full night's sleep is a luxury I rarely afford myself. Rangers aren't supposed to fear the forest. We're supposed to be its protectors, its stewards, but I do. I fear it with a cold, absolute terror. I fear ribbons, those innocent-looking yellow gifts that hide such darkness. I fear cedar rings, those perfectly woven nests of horror. Most of all, I fear the quiet places. The places where the sounds of the world just stop. And where, when your own footsteps fall silent, something else's just got permission to begin. The silence is the invitation. People think the woods are peaceful. They're not. Spend one night out there alone and you'll feel it. That slow, crawling sense that something's watching. Sometimes it's just the wind, but sometimes it's not. I've seen things I can't explain. Ribbons tied high in trees where no one could reach. Footprints that start in the middle of a trail and vanish into thin air. The forest hides things that were never meant to be found. So remember this, the forest doesn't hide monsters. It invites them. It cultivates them. It provides the perfect silent stage for them to hunt. Keep your light bright, your radio close, and if the night goes absolutely still, if the world suddenly holds its breath around you, run. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Just run. Because when everything stops, when the silence descends like a shroud, something just got permission to begin. And you don't want to be there when it does. The woods don't want you lost. They want you found.